This is a question that I got from a teenager I met in Hawaii. And this was, I think, actually a pretty good question to talk about on YouTube as well. So, uh, we were talking about Buddhism, and he had a question that goes like this: Buddha was a prince, right? Buddha was a prince of a kingdom, but he abandoned his kingdom and decided to go down this kind of a path of finding, the awakening or whatever. Okay, so while that's good, the question that my friend had is this. Number one, isn't it kind of a gamble that Buddha did? And moreover, isn't it selfish for Buddha to renounce his kingdom like that when he could have continued down the path of being a king and being a good king to his subjects, right? That way, he could help the people who are suffering in his kingdom. But instead, he ran away from his responsibility. So, can't you say that, number one, Buddha gambled? And number two, Buddha was a little bit selfish? And I think that's a pretty, reasonable perspective, right? It's easy to think that it's not very outlandish to think like this because it's all true, right? There was no Buddha prior to Buddha, and the dominating religion was, Hinduism, and this political system and the sociological system and the structure was based on the caste system and such. Okay, so to address the first question, well, actually to address both questions at the same time, we have to look a little bit into Buddha's life and Buddha's kind of a motivation for wanting to find the way, so to speak. So, we all have different personalities and different interests when it comes to engaging with our life, right? So, we have people who easily give up on things, and that's one way to put it. We have people who think nothing really is that much at stake, right? But on the other hand, we have people who are just kind of like fiercely competitive by nature. We have people who are more reserved and introspective. We have people who tend to be extroverted. We have people of all these different types of personalities, but Buddha specifically had a personality of being very inquisitive and not settling. And I think this is a very important personality trait of the Buddha. And this is something I think I realize the importance of it more and more as I meditate and as I follow the Buddha's path. Because we inquire about a certain question, right? Why do we suffer? And then we sit down and think about it for a little bit. Well, why do we suffer? It's because I think, for example, I want a silver button for my YouTube, but people aren't subscribing fast enough, and so I suffer because, other people. Ah, yes, it's other people that's the problem, right? They're not supporting me in my way. Okay, so I arrived at kind of a conclusion, right? What most people do is, yes, this is it. And then they accept that as the answer. And then they continue living on their lives with this kind of arrived answer. But what Buddha did from a very early age is he wasn't satisfied with the answers that he got because he always wanted to go through the step of verifying whether it was actually true. Is this truthful? Regardless of how I might think about it, is this thing that I just am thinking, is it truthful? So for example, the people tell me this pen is black, but is it actually black? Buddha doesn't just stop at like, oh, other people told me it's black, or like, oh, I can see that it's black. Buddha wants to look at the pen the color in multiple different lightings. Buddha wants to write on it on different surfaces to see how it will reflect. Buddha wants to completely verify whether this pen is black or not, and he doesn't rest. He doesn't give this question a rest until everything has been satisfied, right? So he had this tendency from a very early age. The sutra says even in his teenage years and the formative years, he would learn from his kingdom's best teachers. But on one day, he saw other people suffering, and then he asked the teachers, "Hey, why do people suffer? Why is it that for one person to be happy, another person has to suffer? Why is it that for a tiger to eat, a rabbit has to die?" And the teachers gave him answers, right? Oh, it's because it's the natural cycle, and it's because of the caste system, and they did something in their past life, and now they deserve to live like this. But you, king, you noble prince, you've done a lot of great things in your past life, so now you deserve to live like this, and and celebrate your kingdom and such. But while other people could have been, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, okay, I get that. While other people could have settled with that, Buddha, personality-wise, wasn't happy with that, right? And so he kept on ruminating these big questions, because why? Nobody gave him a satisfactory answer, right? And the suffering that he saw from other people, he saw that it was happening in the kingdom too, like within the palace, because since he saw other people suffering, he himself started suffering. So now he made other people's suffering a very personal problem to him too, right? And with that starts the desire to go out and seek this answer without being part of the kingdom. Why? Why is that? It's because Buddha saw that many people outside of the palace was in starvation, and they were not well taken care of. Why? Because they didn't have a lot of food to eat, they didn't have a lot of money. Why? Because it was all being collected by the kingdom so that the king could be rich, so that the prince could be well fed. Buddha understood that his life, his privileged life, was a byproduct of other people's suffering. So he could have stayed in the kingdom, and he could have been a noble king. He could have spread the resources and such. But the thing is, does that really absolve people of suffering? If people have enough to eat, do they not suffer? If people have enough money to live, do they not suffer? Because Buddha already could see that that is not the case. Because he was well fed. He was eating the finest food. He was, sleeping in the finest bed. He was drinking the finest liquor. So, Buddha had all the reasons to be happy compared to the people outside, but he was suffering too. So, Buddha could have provided for other people, but could Buddha have given them the gift of Dharma, the gift of wisdom, the gift of the absolute truth that frees you from all suffering? He could not have given that to the other people if he had not fled the kingdom, if he had not fled the confines of his palace. But why not? Why am I able to, really confidently say he won't be able to? It's because Buddha had kind of a helicopter parents, right? And this is again a personal history kind of a thing, but the Buddha's father, the king, he was very protective of his son because he could see that his son was of a kind of a different caliber. He was person on a different level. He could see it, and he was his father, right? So there is a tale in the sutra where Buddha sees other people suffering outside of in a farming harvest festival, kind of a beginning of the farming season festival. He saw other people, and he saw the cows sowing the seeds, and the farms grazing the farms, and they were all in pain. And Buddha, for the first time, felt suffering as a kid, and underneath the shade of a tree, he meditated to find peace. And so the king was like, "Oh, where's my son?" And then he saw his son meditating underneath the tree. And even as a father, he felt some kind of a reverence for his own son. And so he knelt before him and said, "Son, it's time to go now." Right? So, ever since Buddha became more introspective and he became more reserved, thinking about these bigger topics, the king grew more nervous. The king grew more worried. Why? Because Buddha was his only son. The kingdom was supposed to go to him after he dies. But now, because if he flees the palace, then what's to come of this kingdom, right? So the king did everything in his power to keep Buddha in the kingdom. He distracted him with the riches. He distracted his son with liquor and women and lands to conquer and all these different things so that he can forget about all these big questions about life. And Buddha had to make a decision to leave because he would not be able to continue living in the palace and sustain his thirst for the truth. And so then why did he venture outside and live the monastic life? It's because the idea of a traveling monk, the idea of a monk who has renounced society, was already a thing in the old times India, because the caste system was a very kind of a rigid system, right? But at the time, India was going through a lot of different cultural shifts because of the commerce and the money, and because of war, and because of different types of religions coming in, and because of all these different things, the really rigid caste system was being challenged. And so people were interested in this, like, what if there was a new way, right? And there were people who wanted to convince, hey, I think this is a really good new way to live. But if I am this person who's trying to, spread my, kind of a religion kind of a thing, but my caste isn't that of a Brahman, right? If I am not servant of the God, then what basis do I have to spread my word, right? So that's why I have to renounce society, and I give away all my possessions, and I just become a unbound person. And with that I say, I come with this new kind of a new age thinking, and I don't prescribe to any system. Buddha admired those people because he saw that the system itself was a big contributor to suffering. Because, yeah, there were untouchable people. There were people in the lower caste who were having a horrible time, and they needed to be just subject to that reality. Because why? It's what you are destined to. But is it? Don't we have free will? Don't we... If we're meant to be this way, then why do we have the capacity to think about it and challenge it? These are the quite big questions that Buddha couldn't answer because he was constantly distracted by his parents in the kingdom, right? And so, did Buddha gamble by going outside? So I talked about why Buddha had to leave. But did Buddha gamble? Of course, yeah. But Buddha was the type of person, Gautama Siddhartha at the time, he was the type of person who was so relentless. And it was fine if he failed, but he could not accept not giving it an earnest try. And that is the beginning of Buddhism as we know it. So, this was some casual Buddhism talk about the Buddha's life, and if you're watching this video, I hope that helped. I already talked about this with you, but I wanted to paint a little bit more color and context and share it with the YouTube audience as well.